All right, tonight's episode will be a special update specifically about AMD stock. This has been a stock that has been absolutely abused and battered, and tomorrow it will report earnings after the bell. So I wanted to take an opportunity to just do a deep analysis here. We'll talk about some fundamental things, and then we'll also look at, more importantly, the technicals on the chart. And everything here is obviously just my opinion. This is not an invitation to buy or sell the stock. I'm just going to talk about some things that I see on the charts, talk about the semiconductors industry as a whole, and why I see this as an interesting opportunity. So the first thing I want to talk about here is just when talking about semiconductors in general, it is very important that if you are trading a semiconductor stock, that you understand something called Moore's Law, which essentially means that semiconductors get smaller and faster, not in a linear curve of growth, but a very parabolic curve, which means this industry changes and adapts very quickly. And to remain a market leader in the semiconductor space means that you need to be on the cutting edge of innovation. Even if it means that your innovation is obsoleting your existing chips, you need to constantly be looking for opportunities to improve and make better hardware. Otherwise, somebody else will come along and do it better than you and take all of your market share away. And you could go from being the number one in town to being absolutely irrelevant. So when we talk about AMD, it's going to be important to understand, are they a leader in the space? And they do two things here. They make GPUs and they make CPUs. And when we talk about their competition and we're looking at GPUs, number one in the space by far, no questions asked, hands down, is NVIDIA. And all of you likely know what NVIDIA does, so I'm not going to spend any time talking about NVIDIA. They are without a doubt the king of the GPU space, the leaders in innovation and AI, and they will likely remain there for a very long time. And then when we talk about CPUs, number one used to be Intel, which is the ticker INTC. But right now, I would argue that number one is actually AMD. Now, when we talk about number two for GPUs, I am going to also say that AMD is number two behind NVIDIA. So it's important to understand that AMD's direct competition is NVIDIA for GPUs, and by far NVIDIA is winning in that space. And then for CPUs, we have number two, which is Intel, and they are currently going to remain at number two, while AMD is going to start taking away all of their market share. So when we look at AMD, I am saying that AMD is number one in CPUs and number two in GPUs. And when we talk about GPUs, the best thing that everybody is going to be looking for will be the two-letter acronym AI. If you do not know what artificial intelligence is, then go look it up. But essentially, these chips are required to do a lot of this processing and a lot of this data mining that AI is needing so that it can get smarter and better and more efficient. So the faster data can be processed and the better the GPUs are, the better off everybody is going to be, especially when we're talking about a global race for dominance in this industry. And if we're talking about Moore's Law in general, eventually this technology is going to be quote unquote good enough, and that is when cost is really going to start to matter, and that is where I think AMD is going to step in as a leader in this space. So fundamentally, just understand Moore's Law, understand that AMD is very good at what they do. They're competing with the number one company at GPUs, and they are the number one company at CPUs. And that will make a lot more sense if you just understand that very high level and very big picture on a lot of the other things we're going to talk about when we get to the technicals. So that's all I want to talk about for the fundamentals. We are looking at weekly charts here. So this is very macro level scale. If you are a day trader, this is never going to help you trade better. This is macro level swing trader stuff you need to understand. So every single candle on this chart is one entire week's worth of price action. So it's going to be 4 candlesticks just to move the market for an entire month. So this is very macro level scale here. So when we look at AMD, I am looking at the weekly chart here, and from the current price, we are sitting right around $114. And if we just take that to the left of the screen, the last time AMD was at that price was back here in July of 2021. And back in July of 2021, when AMD was also trading at $114, their earnings report back then had revenue reported of $3.85 billion, and their earnings reported here is 0.63. So they were generating decent amounts of revenue. They're a profitable company, and as the earnings went on, we have 4.31 billion, 4.83 billion, 5.89 billion, 6.5 billion, 5.57 billion, 5.6 billion, 5.35, 5.36, 5.8, 6.17, 5.47, 5.83, 6.82, and the earnings that's coming up tomorrow, they're estimating 7.53. So if we go back to where AMD was a year ago when they reported earnings at 3.85 billion to today, where they're at the same exact price per share, their earnings and revenue here is doubled at 7.53 billion, and their earnings estimate will be 1.08. So when we look at the company as a whole, we can clearly see their revenue is growing. They are still a profitable company, and they're competing with the number one in the GPU space, and they are number one in the CPU space. So all that we care to see after earnings is that they're still reporting strong earnings and, more importantly, strong guidance. And we want to see evidence that they can slowly chip away at NVIDIA's dominance in the AI data center field by simply just offering a solution that is more cost effective, even if it's not as strong in performance. Now, nobody is going to dethrone NVIDIA anytime soon, so this is not a video claiming that AMD can do that. I am simply saying that NVIDIA just needs to do what they do well and continue to grow in their own spaces. So we're not going to look at an NVIDIA chart, but I do want to show you an Intel chart, because on the weekly chart of Intel, you can clearly see Moore's law in effect, because Intel is trading down here right around $19. And the last time Nvidia was $19, if we look to the left of the screen, was in 1997. Some of you watching this video may not have even been born in 1997. And if you were an investor of Intel and you bought in 1997 and you held all the way until 2025, you have $0 to show for it. So this is Moore's law in effect, because Intel, who was the king of the processors and the CPUs back in the day, and by far these were the best chips you could possibly get if you needed the best CPU on the market, they have clearly lost their dominance and lost their foothold in the industry. And this company is in turmoil, and their stock price has gone absolutely nowhere since 1997. So when we look at competition, it should be undoubtedly obvious that AMD is eating Intel's lunch, and obviously nobody is taking Nvidia's lunch anytime soon. So we're not really asking the question of whether or not AMD is the best GPU company. We're simply saying, are they going to be able to grow? And will they be able to remain dominant in the CPU space? So that's what's going to be answered after earnings. I don't know. I'm just telling you what you should be looking for and what you should be paying attention to. You want to see that they're still dominant in CPUs, and any evidence that they can start to chip away at NVIDIA's market share, which will be very important, because right now NVIDIA can demand a market premium, and they're going to remain that way as long as they don't have competition in performance. So now I just want to strictly look at the chart on AMD. This is a weekly chart with a weekly 200 period moving average, and we are sitting right on top of it. And I am very confident, with 95% confidence, that at some point this year, AMD is going to at least 137. And in the short term, it's possible it can go down towards 108 or down towards 95. And then from there, I still have that 95% confidence that we would go to 137. So in a very short term trade, and not even a longer term thing here, I would be buying AMD all the way down towards $95 to sell it at 137. And the reason that I would do this is because if we put on the risk reward position for this price and we have that as our profit, I can easily get a very favorable risk reward ratio at these prices of a 1.5x reward for the risk that I'm taking. And I would easily be able to say that I can close this trade with 95% confidence in a profitable position if I have a plan to buy dips and secure profit at 137. Now, longer term, I do believe AMD can go much higher. And I think longer term, I'm looking for 171. And that would obviously mean you could adjust your risk reward ratio a lot bigger. And obviously a lot of this comes with position size, because if you're taking on more risk, you want to make sure it's not going to blow up your entire account if you lose. So 171 for medium term, that could take us well out towards the end of the year. But more importantly, I do believe there's opportunity here for brand new all-time highs, and I'm going to give a modest price target at the previous all-time high right around 200. And from today's close, that would be a profit of over 80%. So clearly this is an opportunity for long-term swing traders to consider, as long as earnings shows positive growth. So the way I personally like this trade is playing it up to 137 to reduce risk. Once we get to 137, you could easily turn this into a no risk position, because you can move your stop loss and your risk up as price continues to go higher. And if we get any evidence of higher lows and higher highs from this bear trend, then you could obviously manage risk from the higher lows. And when we look at the the all-time high on AMD to where we are today, we are down 50% from the all-time high. So this is definitely a bear market in AMD stock, and it could be near an exact bottom before another monster bull run that could take it to a brand new all-time high, or at least those short-term targets at 137, 171, and 200. So big picture here, earnings is going to tell us everything we need to know, because we need to see that AMD is still number one in the CPU space and any evidence that they can chip away at the GPU space. And obviously price action will be king here, because at this risk level right here, right around 114 and 108, we need to see proof that buyers are stepping in at support. This is where you're going to manage your risk. If you take any trades on this stock, whether it's short or long, you need to manage risk somewhere. So 114 and 108, if we break down, then we have that last opportunity right around 95. And if price cannot hold at these levels, there could be something very fundamentally wrong with this stock, and that will be more evident after we get the earnings report. And you would need to see some major evidence that they can no longer compete in these spaces. I personally think this company has a great CEO. I think she's doing a great job positioning AMD for the future, which is important when we talk about a semiconductor stock because of Moore's Law. So understand that and go look at Intel and how they have been struggling and how they're still trading at 1997 prices. So don't think for 1 second that AMD is immune to risk. There's still plenty of risk here, so you need to account for that. But obviously risk comes with reward. So if you're going to take on any risk, make sure the reward is worth it to you. And don't just take my word for it. Go do the analysis yourself. Go look into the company yourself. This has just been a very hot stock a lot of people are talking about over the past 6 to 12 months, even though it's in a bear market. And it's important to know what you are buying and what its opportunities are, and more importantly, that you're managing risk to the potential reward. So that's my take on this stock. I personally think it has lots of opportunity. I think the risk is getting burned down as we come into these very low risk entries on the weekly chart. And then the earnings report should be the tell all, because we need to see a beat and raise in guidance. And then I think we'll very quickly break the bear market and start back into a bull market, which could be very profitable if we start running higher towards $200. So just a quick summary, 95% confidence that we will at least see 137. Take it or leave it for what it's worth. There's a chance I could be wrong. And then obviously a lot weighs in on the earnings report. I do think this company has what it takes to have a very strong bull run this year, and it's still very early in the year, so this could be a great opportunity to consider it. So thank you for watching, everybody. I hope you're crushing this market, and as always, I will see you in the next episode.